The screaming never stops in hell. I remember the sound of brass grinding against bone when I first witnessed true immortal rage clash with demonic corruption. My name is Inquisitor Valerian Thorne, former Ordo Malleus, now bearer of impossible knowledge. I've seen the Emperor's tarot show cards that don't exist. A warrior in green armor standing over the corpse of Angron himself. You think that makes me a heretic, but you don't know what I've witnessed in the deepest archives of Titan. There exists a warrior from another reality, another hell entirely. The Adeptus Mechanicus designation reads, Subject 2016, the Slayer. Where our champions fall to corruption, he grows stronger. Where our faith wavers against demonic might, his fury burns eternal. The question isn't whether such a being could exist. I've seen the censor logs from Cadia's final hour. The question is what happens when unstoppable force meets immovable corruption. This is my testimony of impossibility made manifest. Chapter 1. The Impossible Warrior. The first time I heard whispers of the Impossible Warrior, I was deep in the archives beneath the Grey Knight's fortress monastery on Titan. The smell of ancient parchment and sanctified oils filled my nostrils as I pored over classified reports that bore seals I didn't recognize. 300 years of service to the Ordo Malleus had taught me to distinguish between mythology and reality, but what I found in those documents challenged everything I understood about the nature of conflict between the material realm and the warp. Brother Captain Alaric of the Grey Knights stood behind me, his massive frame casting shadows across the candlelit scriptorium. His psychic-dampened voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Inquisitor Thorne, what you're about to read never officially existed. The Ordo Malleus has spent decades trying to classify these events, and we've concluded that some truths are too dangerous for standard Imperial doctrine. The first report came from the agri-world of Kelmer's Hope, a planet that had suffered demonic incursion during the Gothic War. According to the testimony of surviving Imperial Guard regiments, a single warrior in archaic power armor had appeared during the height of the demon assault. The description defied logic: emerald green ceramite plating that bore no chapter markings, no Imperial aquila, no sacred texts or purity seals. More disturbing was the warrior's apparent immunity to warp-based attacks that had been reducing entire companies to screaming madness. Sergeant Major Grimwald of the Cadian 47th Shock Troops provided the most detailed account. The Demon Prince Velashax had just finished eviscerating Colonel Morrison when this thing appeared. At first we thought it was another Astartes, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too broad, moving with a speed that made our finest veterans look like children. The Demon Prince turned its attention to this newcomer, probably expecting easy prey. What followed, according to 17 independent witnesses, was the systematic dismantlement of a greater demon using nothing but conventional weaponry and what could only be described as absolute tactical fury. The warrior's arsenal included a shotgun that fired shells capable of staggering demon princes, some form of plasma rifle that required no cooling cycles, and most impossibly, a blade that cut through warp-forged armor as if it were cloth. The demon kept trying to corrupt him, Grimwald's report continued. We saw the purple energies wrapping around the warrior's armor, the kind of psychic assault that turns space marines into gibbering wrecks. But nothing happened. The warrior just kept advancing, kept firing, kept cutting. When Velashax tried to retreat back into the warp, the warrior produced some kind of grappling device and physically pulled the demon back into real space. The screaming lasted for 47 minutes. Brother Captain Alaric turned another page, revealing pict captures taken by servo skulls during the engagement. The images were grainy, distorted by the electromagnetic interference common during demonic manifestations, but they showed enough. A humanoid figure in green armor standing atop the dissolving corpse of a demon prince, surrounded by the scattered remains of lesser demons. What struck me most profoundly was the warrior's posture, not triumphant, not exhausted, simply ready for the next target. The survivor reports all mention the same details, Alaric explained. Absolute silence from the warrior himself, perfect tactical awareness, And most disturbing of all, apparent familiarity with demonic physiology. This wasn't lucky strikes or divine intervention. This was systematic extermination based on extensive practical knowledge. The second major incident occurred during the Plague Wars of Ultramar. A Nurgle corruption had taken root on the hive world of Tertius Minor, spreading the usual blessings of the Plague Father, festering wounds that never healed, diseases that turned human minds into vectors for chaos worship, and ultimately the manifestation of Typhus himself, the herald of Nurgle, bringing his particular brand of immortal pestilence to an already suffering world. The Imperial response had been everything doctrine demanded: Ultramarine strike forces, Astra Militarum quarantine regiments, and eventually, the involvement of the Death Watch when standard cleansing protocols proved insufficient. For 6 months, the Imperial forces had been locked in grinding attrition warfare against an enemy that grew stronger with each casualty they inflicted, each disease they spread, each moment of despair they cultivated among the defending troops. Captain Uriel Ventris of the Ultramarines provided the official after-action report, though certain details had been classified until I gained access through my inquisitorial authority. We had established a perimeter around the primary hive spire, attempting to contain the corruption while planning a coordinated assault on Typhus's stronghold. Our apothecaries estimated that a direct assault would result in 90% casualties, but the alternative was allowing the plague to spread to neighboring systems. The situation changed when sensors detected an unauthorized drop pod landing deep within the corrupted zone. Imperial forces initially assumed it was either a misguided civilian evacuation attempt or possible chaos reinforcements, but the energy signature was unlike anything in Imperial databases. More concerning was the immediate reduction in Chaos Vox traffic following the landing. Not the silence of death, but the silence of sudden, intense focus on a specific threat. Approximately 14 hours after the unauthorized landing, we began receiving fragmentary reports from our scouts, Ventris continued. Something was systematically destroying Plague Marine positions from within the corrupted zone. Not tactical retreats, not redeployment, complete annihilation. Squads that had held their positions for months were going silent in sequence, moving from the outer perimeter toward Typhus's central stronghold. The tactical implications fascinated me as much as they horrified me. A single warrior was apparently conducting a one-person assault through territory that had required 3 companies of Space Marines to merely contain. The corrupted hive city of Tertius Minor stretched across hundreds of square kilometers, filled with everything from cultist militias to demon engines to the legendary Plague Marines themselves, led by one of Nurgle's most favored champions. Yet the pattern continued with mechanical precision. Surveillance drones that managed to penetrate the corrupted zone transmitted brief glimpses of the same emerald-armored figure, moving through environments that should have been instantly fatal to any unprotected human. Nurgle's plagues created atmospheric conditions that could dissolve ceramite armor within minutes, psychic corruption that could turn the purest soul to chaos worship, and physical mutations that transformed even Space Marines into writhing abominations of flesh and metal. The warrior seemed immune to all of it. More than immune, the report suggested he was actively seeking out the worst concentrations of corruption, as if drawn to them by some inexplicable compulsion. Tech Marine Cassius provided sensor readings that defied explanation. The warrior's armor showed no signs of degradation, despite prolonged exposure to viral agents that had been eating through our own equipment. More troubling was the energy signature we detected from his weapons, power readings that should have required a portable fusion reactor, but with no corresponding heat signatures or radiation emissions. The climax came when the warrior reached Typhus himself. The Herald of Nurgle had established his command post in the central cathedral of the Hive City, a structure that had been transformed into a living organism of sorts. Walls that breathed with diseased lungs, floors that pulsed with infected blood, and air thick with viral agents that could corrupt the purest of souls within seconds of exposure. According to the testimony of captured cultists who witnessed the final confrontation, the battle lasted exactly 37 minutes. Typhus, a demon prince whose power had been growing for millennia, whose very presence could turn faith into despair and hope into pestilence, faced an opponent who seemed to become more focused, more efficient, more deadly with each passing moment. The Herald tried everything, one cultist babbled during interrogation, before succumbing to the usual post-exposure madness. The Destroyer Hive, the Dolorous Bells, even direct manifestation of the Plague Father's favor. Nothing touched him. The warrior just kept advancing, kept shooting, kept existing, as if the very concept of corruption was meaningless to him. Brother Captain Alaric closed the file, his psychically enhanced features showing an expression I had rarely seen on a Grey Knight's face. Genuine uncertainty. Inquisitor, in my 4 centuries of service to the Emperor, I have faced every classification of demon, every form of chaos corruption, every abomination that crawls out of the warp. But this warrior represents something outside our understanding of how reality functions. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of implications settling over me like a funeral shroud. Have there been other incidents? Other confirmed sightings? 17 documented cases across 7 sectors over the past century, Alaric replied. Each time, the pattern remains consistent. A single warrior in green armor appears during major demonic incursions, systematically eliminates all chaos forces regardless of their power level, and then vanishes without any communication with Imperial forces. No requests for support, no coordination with local command structures, no acknowledgement of Imperial authority. The silence stretched between us as I processed what I was learning. The Imperium of Man had been fighting chaos for 10,000 years, had developed elaborate doctrines, specialized equipment, and genetically enhanced warriors specifically to combat the forces of the warp. Yet here was evidence of someone, something, that treated demon princes and heretic primarchs as little more than target practice. "There's more," Alaric said, producing another file marked with seals I recognized from the deepest vaults of the Ordo Malleus. 3 months ago, we detected massive warp disturbances in the Maelstrom, the kind of energies that typically precede Demon Primarch manifestations. Our astropathic choirs reported screaming from the Immaterium itself, and several suffered permanent psychic damage just from proximity to whatever was occurring. He opened the file to reveal sensor logs from a dozen different Imperial vessels, all showing the same impossible readings. A localized reality storm within the Maelstrom that had been growing in intensity for several weeks, followed by a sudden complete cessation of all warp activity. Not the gradual fade of a dying storm, but the absolute silence that comes from something being thoroughly, permanently destroyed. The silence lasted for 72 hours, Alaric continued. When our reconnaissance vessels finally managed to penetrate the area, they found debris fields that matched the energy signatures of Demon Prince manifestations. Lots of them, but no living chaos forces, no corrupted vessels, no evidence of any survivors. Just empty space where a major chaos stronghold had existed for 3,000 years. I studied the sensor logs, noting the power readings that suggested weapon discharges unlike anything in Imperial arsenals. "Do we have any identification of which Demon Prince was destroyed?" Alaric's expression grew even more grim. According to our intelligence networks within the Chaos Fleets, it wasn't just one Demon Prince. The Maelstrom stronghold was being used as a gathering point for a major offensive against Imperial space. Preliminary reports suggest that at least 4 Demon Princes were present, along with their supporting fleets and mortal followers, all eliminated by what appears to be the same single warrior. The implications staggered me. Demon Princes were beings of such power that the Imperium typically required entire crusade fleets to address a single manifestation. The idea that one warrior could eliminate multiple Demon Princes, along with their supporting forces, challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of power in the galaxy. "Brother Captain," I said slowly, "what does the Ordo Malleus believe this warrior actually is?" Alaric was quiet for a long moment, his psychically enhanced senses probably detecting the subtle shifts in my emotional state as I struggled to process what I was learning. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone delivering a truth that he himself found difficult to accept. "We have 3 primary theories, Inquisitor, though none of them fit comfortably within established Imperial doctrine. The first possibility is that this warrior is some form of lost Primarch technology, perhaps an experimental creation from the dark age of technology that has somehow survived to the present day. The combat effectiveness and apparent immunity to chaos corruption would support this hypothesis. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say next. The second theory is that this warrior represents some form of divine intervention, perhaps a manifestation of the Emperor's will given physical form. The timing of his appearances, always during critical moments when chaos forces threaten to achieve strategic victories, suggests a level of cosmic awareness that transcends normal human consciousness. And the third theory? I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know the answer. The third theory is the most disturbing, Alaric admitted. That this warrior comes from somewhere else entirely. Not another planet, not another time, but another reality where the laws of physics and metaphysics operate according to different principles. A place where perhaps humanity developed different solutions to the problem of chaos, different ways of fighting back against the darkness. The concept of alternate realities was not unknown to Imperial science, though it was rarely discussed outside the highest levels of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Ordo Malleus. The warp itself was proof that reality was far more complex and malleable than most citizens could comprehend, and there were theoretical frameworks that allowed for the existence of parallel universes where history had unfolded differently. If that's true, I said, thinking through the implications, then this warrior might represent what humanity could become if we had made different choices, developed different technologies, faced different threats, a version of humanity that had actually won its war against chaos. Alaric nodded grimly. Which brings us to why you're here, Inquisitor. The Ordo Malleus has received intelligence suggesting that this warrior may soon face his greatest challenge yet. Something is stirring in the Eye of Terror, something that has the Daemon Primarchs themselves taking notice. If our mysterious warrior is indeed planning to confront whatever is emerging from the Eye, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the archive chamber. The Eye of Terror was the largest warp storm in the galaxy, a place where reality itself had been shattered during the fall of the Eldar Empire. It was home to the Chaos Space Marine Legions, the Daemon Primarchs who had betrayed the Emperor during the Horus Heresy, and worse things still that defied classification by Imperial science. Which Daemon Primarch? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Our intelligence suggests multiple possibilities, Alaric replied. But the energy signatures we've detected suggest either Angron, the Red Angel of Khorne, or possibly even Magnus the Red himself. Either would represent a threat level that goes beyond anything this warrior has faced before. I closed my eyes, trying to envision what such a confrontation might look like. Daemon Primarchs were beings of such power that their mere presence could alter local reality, turn loyal Imperial citizens into frothing berserkers or gibbering madmen, and command legions of Chaos Space Marines who had been fighting since before the Imperium's founding. Yet if the reports were accurate, this mysterious warrior had been systematically eliminating Chaos forces with what appeared to be casual efficiency. The question wasn't whether such a confrontation would occur. Given the pattern of appearances, it seemed inevitable. The question was, what would happen to the galaxy if humanity's greatest champions faced off against beings that transcended mortal understanding of power and corruption? Chapter 2. The Red Angel's Domain. The brass citadel of Angron's domain exists in a realm where physics bends to the will of pure rage. As I descended deeper into the classified archives of the Grey Knights, Brother Captain Alaric revealed intelligence that made my 3 centuries of demon hunting experience feel like children's games. The Red Angel's realm within the Eye of Terror had been growing stronger, more stable, more capable of projecting its influence into real space with each passing year since his ascension to Daemon Primarch status. What you need to understand, Inquisitor, Alaric said as he activated a hollow projector showing strategic maps of the Eye of Terror, is that Angron is no longer bound by the limitations that once constrained him. During the Horus Heresy, He was merely an angry Primarch with severe psychological damage from the Butcher's nails. Now he is the living embodiment of Khorne's fury, capable of manifesting anywhere in the galaxy where sufficient violence creates the necessary warp conditions. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional representation of the Daemon Primarchs' domain, a realm of brass fortresses and rivers of blood that existed in a state of perpetual warfare. Millions of demon engines marched in endless formations across plains of skulls, while Chaos Space Marines from the World Eaters Legion conducted training exercises that would kill normal humans through proximity alone. The scale of the military buildup was staggering, enough force to challenge entire Imperial sectors. More disturbing were the intelligence reports from deep-cover Inquisition operatives who had somehow managed to infiltrate the outer edges of Angron's domain. Their accounts, transmitted at the cost of their sanity and often their lives, painted a picture of a realm where the very concept of peaceful existence had been purged from reality itself. The air itself was said to induce murderous rage in anyone who breathed it, while the ground was composed of the compressed remains of countless battles fought across millennia. Tech adept Magos Vex of the Ordo Malleus had attempted to analyze the energy readings from Angron's realm, though the effort had required extensive psychic shielding and resulted in the loss of 3 servitors to spontaneous berserker fury. The Daemon Primarch's presence generates what we classify as a violence cascade effect, Vex's mechanical voice explained through the Vox recorder. Reality itself becomes more conducive to conflict, weapons become more destructive, and the psychological barriers that prevent mortals from committing extreme violence begin to dissolve. What made Angron particularly dangerous was his tactical evolution since ascending to Demon Prince status. During the Heresy, he had been a blunt instrument of destruction, powerful but predictable, relying on overwhelming fury to crush his enemies. Intelligence suggested that 10,000 years of existence as a Demon Primarch had refined his approach without diminishing his fundamental nature. He had become strategic in his rage, calculated in his fury, capable of long-term planning while maintaining the berserker intensity that made him Khorne's chosen champion. The evidence for this evolution came from analysis of recent chaos incursions that bore Angron's influence, rather than the chaotic, undirected violence that had characterized World Eaters' operations during the Heresy. These attacks showed sophisticated tactical planning combined with absolutely ruthless execution. Supply lines were severed with surgical precision before main assaults began. Command structures were decapitated through targeted strikes, and civilian populations were herded into specific locations where their terror and suffering could feed the Daemon Primarch's power most efficiently. "The Red Angel has learned patience," Brother Captain Alaric observed grimly. "He understands that unfocused rage burns bright but brief, while controlled fury can sustain itself indefinitely. This makes him far more dangerous than the Berserker Primarch who fought during the Siege of Terra." I studied the tactical analyses, noting patterns that suggested intelligence gathering and long-term strategic planning that would have been impossible for the Angron of old. How does this relate to our mysterious warrior? Has there been any indication that Angron is aware of his existence? Alaric activated another section of the holo display, showing warp current readings from the past several months. The normal chaotic swirl of energy that characterized the Eye of Terror showed unusual patterns, streams of fury and violence that seemed to be converging on specific coordinates deep within Angron's domain. Our astropathic analysts believe the Daemon Primarch is not just aware of the warrior's existence, but actively seeking to draw him into a confrontation. The implications were staggering. If Angron was indeed attempting to lure the mysterious warrior into his own domain, it suggested a level of strategic thinking that went far beyond what Imperial intelligence had previously attributed to the Red Angel. More troubling was what it meant for the warrior himself. Every previous encounter had taken place in real space, where the laws of physics provided at least some constraints on demon power. Within Angron's domain in the warp, those constraints would be replaced by the raw will of Khorne himself. Has anyone attempted to analyze what the warrior's chances might be in such an encounter? I asked, though I suspected the answer would be unsettling. The Ordo Malleus has run every simulation we can devise, Alaric replied. The results are inconsistent. When we model the warrior based on his demonstrated capabilities in real space, the projections suggest he would be overwhelmed within minutes of entering Angron's domain. A Daemon Primarch in his own realm possesses power levels that approach those of the Chaos Gods themselves. He paused, manipulating the holodisplay to show comparative power analyses. However, when we factor in the warrior's apparent immunity to chaos corruption and his demonstrated ability to adapt to increasingly powerful opponents, the models break down entirely. We simply don't have enough data to predict how someone who exists outside our understanding of reality might function in a realm where reality itself is subordinate to Khorne's will. The silence stretched between us as I contemplated what such a confrontation might look like. Angron, in his demon prince form, was described as a being of living brass and flame, standing 12 meters tall and wielding weapons that could cleave through Titan armor as if it were paper. His very presence on a battlefield could drive entire armies into berserker fury, while his personal combat abilities had been enhanced beyond anything remotely human by millennia of existence as Khorne's champion. Yet the warrior had already demonstrated the ability to destroy multiple demon princes, beings that were themselves far beyond the power level of normal space marines or even Grey Knights. The question was whether there was a fundamental difference between demon princes and demon primarchs, or whether they simply represented different points on the same scale of warp-enhanced power. "Brother Captain," I said slowly, "what do we actually know about the warrior's equipment and capabilities? Every report mentions the same green armor, but there must be more detailed analysis available." Alaric nodded, producing yet another classified file. Tech Marine specialists from multiple chapters have attempted to analyze the weapon signatures and armor capabilities based on battlefield recordings. What they've found challenges several fundamental assumptions about technology and warfare. The technical analysis read like something from the dark age of technology, filled with energy readings and material properties that exceeded anything in current Imperial arsenals. The warrior's armor appeared to be constructed from materials that were simultaneously lighter than ceramite and more durable than adamantium, with power systems that generated massive energy outputs without any detectable fuel source or heat dissipation. More intriguing were the weapon analyses. The warrior's primary armament appeared to be some form of plasma weapon that fired continuously without requiring cooling cycles, generating projectiles with penetrating power that exceeded even the most advanced Imperial technology. Secondary weapons included a shotgun that fired shells capable of staggering demon princes, and some form of projectile launcher that created explosions equivalent to artillery bombardments. The most disturbing aspect, the tech analysis continued, is the apparent intelligence of the equipment itself. Battlefield recordings show the warrior switching between different ammunition types and weapon configurations based on the specific threats he faces, suggesting either advanced AI assistance or equipment that actively adapts to combat situations. I frowned, considering the implications. Are we talking about some form of machine spirit involvement? Technology that has achieved a level of sapience? That's one possibility, Alaric agreed. But the energy signatures suggest something more sophisticated than even the most advanced machine spirits. The equipment appears to be analyzing enemy weaknesses in real time and automatically optimizing its performance accordingly. It's technology that learns and adapts faster than the user could consciously direct it. The concept was both fascinating and terrifying. Imperial technology was built on the principle of sacred patterns and blessed rituals, with innovation carefully controlled by the Adeptus Mechanicus to prevent the kind of technological hubris that had led to the dark age of technology's collapse. Yet here was evidence of technology that exceeded Imperial capabilities by orders of magnitude, operated by someone who showed no signs of chaos corruption despite wielding power that should have attracted the attention of every daemon in the warp. "There's something else," Alaric said, his expression growing even more grim. "Our intelligence networks have detected unusual activity in the other Daemon Primarchs' domains. Magnus the Red has been conducting extensive scrying operations, apparently attempting to locate and analyze the warrior." Mortarion has been experimenting with new plague formulations specifically designed to affect beings with unusual resistance to biological agents. Even Fulgrim has taken notice, creating demon engines specifically designed to test the limits of the warrior's combat abilities. The idea that all 4 Daemon Primarchs were taking the mysterious warrior seriously enough to begin active preparations was sobering. These were beings who had spent 10,000 years locked in their own internal conflicts and schemes for galactic domination. For them to unite, even temporarily, in response to a single threat, suggested that the warrior represented something far more significant than just another powerful opponent. "Do we have any intelligence on what specifically has caught their attention?" I asked. "What makes this warrior different from the other champions who have opposed chaos over the millennia?" Alaric was quiet for a moment, clearly considering how much classified information he was authorized to share with me. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone revealing state secrets that could reshape Imperial understanding of the galaxy. "There have been certain theological implications that have concerned the highest levels of the Ordo Malleus," he said carefully. "The warrior's apparent immunity to chaos corruption isn't just unusual. It's theoretically impossible according to our understanding of how the warp functions. Every soul generates some form of psychic resonance that can be exploited by chaos powers. Every mind has fears, desires, or weaknesses that can be turned against it. But this warrior appears to exist in a state of perfect psychic equilibrium." He activated another section of the archive, revealing reports from some of the Imperium's most powerful psychers. Librarians from multiple Space Marine chapters, sanctioned psychers from the Astra Militarum, even Grey Knight epistolaries had attempted to analyze the warrior's psychic signature during his various appearances. The results were consistent and disturbing. The warrior appeared to generate no psychic presence whatsoever. "It's not that he's psychically shielded," Alaric explained. "Psychic shields create detectable distortions in the warp, signatures that trained psychers can recognize and analyze. This warrior simply doesn't exist psychically. When psychers attempt to perceive him, they report seeing nothing, not invisibility, not concealment, but actual absence, as if the space he occupies is simply empty of any spiritual presence." The theological implications were staggering. Imperial doctrine held that all living beings possess souls that reflected into the warp, creating the psychic resonance that allowed for astropathic communication, warp travel, and the various psychic abilities that underpinned Imperial civilization. A being that existed without any psychic presence would be fundamentally different from anything else in the galaxy. Perhaps not even truly alive in the sense that Imperial science understood the term. "The Daemon Primarchs are aware of this anomaly," Alaric continued. "According to our intelligence sources, it's what has drawn their attention more than the warrior's combat capabilities. They recognize him as something that shouldn't be able to exist according to the laws that govern the warp and real space interaction." I felt a chill as I processed the implications. If the warrior truly exists outside the normal parameters of spiritual reality, then confronting him might represent more than just a personal challenge for the Daemon Primarchs. It could threaten their fundamental understanding of how reality functions. "Exactly," Alaric agreed grimly. "Which is why we believe Angron is attempting to draw the warrior into his domain, not just to destroy him, but to understand him, to determine whether his existence represents a threat to the Chaos Gods themselves." The scope of what we were discussing began to overwhelm me. I had spent 3 centuries fighting demons, heretics, and worse things that crawled out of the warp's darkest corners. But this warrior represented something beyond the normal categories of threat that the Imperium had learned to categorize and combat. He was either humanity's greatest hope or its most dangerous delusion, and the distinction might not become clear until it was too late to matter. "Brother Captain," I said finally, "what does the Ordo Malleus want me to do with this information?" Alaric's expression grew deadly serious. "We want you to witness what happens when unstoppable force meets immovable corruption, Inquisitor. The Grey Knights are preparing a strike force to monitor the situation from maximum safe distance. If this confrontation occurs, someone needs to survive to report what actually happens. Someone needs to document whether our mysterious warrior represents salvation or damnation. I nodded slowly, understanding the weight of responsibility being placed on my shoulders. Whatever was about to unfold in the depths of the Eye of Terror would reshape Imperial understanding of power, corruption, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. And I would be there to witness it, to record it, and hopefully, to survive long enough to warn the Imperium of what was coming. The brass citadel of Angron's domain pulsed with anticipation, its endless walls pausing for the first time in millennia as the Red Angel prepared for a confrontation that would echo across eternity. In the distance, sensors detected the approach of something that registered as little more than a green dot against the crimson sky, but which carried implications that would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of good and evil. Chapter 3: The Slayer's Arsenal. The first comprehensive analysis of the warrior's equipment came from the most unlikely source imaginable, a corrupted Chaos Tech Marine who had defected to Imperial forces after witnessing the warrior in action during the siege of Mordian Prime. Brother Vox Captain Keldron, formerly of the Iron Warriors, had spent 40 centuries perfecting the art of technological warfare in service to the Dark Mechanicum before something he witnessed fundamentally changed his understanding of what technology could achieve. I interviewed Keldron in the deepest security cells of the Grey Knight's fortress, his corrupted form restrained by psychic inhibitors and blessed adamantium chains. Despite his obvious chaos mutations, brass cables growing from his spine, mechanical tentacles where his left arm had once been, and cognitive implants that glowed with unholy power, his technical expertise remained unparalleled. More importantly, he had been close enough to the mysterious warrior to conduct detailed scanner analysis of his equipment. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, Inquisitor." Keldron's mechanically enhanced voice buzzed with static and what might have been fear. "I've studied every form of technology that exists in this galaxy. Dark Age of technology artifacts, alien tech from species that mastered science before humanity learned to make fire, even experimental gear created by the Chaos Gods themselves. But this warrior's equipment operates according to principles that simply don't exist in our reality." Brother Captain Alaric stood behind me, his psychic abilities focused on detecting any deception or chaos-tainted influences in the former Chaos Marine's testimony. The slight nod he gave indicated that Keldron was telling the truth as he understood it, though whether that truth aligned with objective reality remained to be determined. "Describe the warrior's primary weapon," I ordered, activating a recording device that would capture every nuance of the interrogation for later analysis by tech adepts and Margot specialists. Keldron's optical implants whirred as they focused on some internal memory file. "The plasma weapon he carries should be impossible, according to every law of physics I understand. Plasma requires massive energy generation, sophisticated magnetic containment, and cooling systems that typically make such weapons impractical for extended combat. But his weapon fires continuously, generates no detectable heat signatures, and produces projectiles with penetrating power that exceeds anything in Imperial or Chaos arsenals." He paused, his mechanical components making subtle adjustments as he accessed deeper memory banks. During the Mordian engagement, I recorded him firing for 73 consecutive minutes without any sign of power depletion or thermal buildup. The weapon appeared to be drawing energy from some source that doesn't correspond to any known technology, not fusion, not antimatter, not even direct warp energy conversion. The implications were staggering. Imperial plasma weapons were notorious for their maintenance requirements and the constant risk of catastrophic overheating. Even the most advanced plasma cannons used by Space Marine forces required cooling cycles and had limited ammunition capacity. Yet this warrior's primary weapon appeared to operate without any of these constraints. "What about the secondary armaments?" I asked, noting that every previous report had mentioned multiple weapon systems. "The shotgun interests me most from a technical perspective," Keldron admitted. "Projectile weapons are among the most primitive forms of technology, conceptually simple enough that every civilization develops them independently. But his shotgun fires shells that stagger demon princes, beings whose physical forms are held together by pure warp energy rather than conventional matter." He manipulated his mechanical tentacles, apparently accessing additional memory files. I analyzed the crater patterns left by his weapon impacts. The shells appear to contain some form of exotic matter that interacts directly with warp-based entities. Not blessed ammunition, not psychically charged rounds, but something that actually disrupts the fundamental forces that allow demons to manifest in real space. Brother Captain Alaric leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. Are you suggesting that this warrior has access to technology that can affect the warp itself? More than that, Keldron replied. I believe his equipment exists in a state of partial dimensional displacement. When he fires, the projectiles travel through real space, but their impact effects seem to occur across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. It's the only way to explain how conventional projectiles can cause physical damage to beings that don't truly exist in physical reality. The concept made my head spin. Imperial science acknowledged the existence of multiple dimensional layers, real space, the warp, and various theoretical intermediate states, but actually manipulating the interactions between these layers required technology far beyond anything currently available to the Imperium. Even the most advanced Adeptus Mechanicus facilities could barely detect dimensional variations, much less create weapons that exploited them. Describe the armor, I ordered, hoping that the warrior's defensive systems might be more comprehensible than his weapons. Keldron's optical implants dimmed slightly, a sign that he was accessing his most detailed memory files. The armor presents the greatest technical mystery. It appears to be constructed from materials that are simultaneously lighter than ceramite and more durable than adamantium, which should be physically impossible according to material science. But more disturbing is its apparent intelligence. Intelligence? Alaric interjected. You mean it contains sophisticated machine spirits? No, Keldron said firmly. Machine spirits, even the most advanced ones, operate according to predictable patterns. They follow programmed responses to specific situations, guided by millennia of sacred rituals and blessed protocols. This armor demonstrates adaptive intelligence that exceeds anything I've encountered in 4,000 years of technological warfare. He manipulated his controls again, projecting holographic displays that showed frame-by-frame analysis of the warrior in combat. Watch how the armor responds to different types of damage. When faced with energy weapons, specific sections become more reflective. When confronting physical projectiles, the surface hardens and redistributes impact energy. When exposed to psychic attacks, the entire suit generates some form of interference field that disrupts warp-based effects. The recordings were indeed remarkable. The warrior's armor appeared to analyze incoming threats and optimize its defensive properties in real time, faster than conscious thought could direct such changes. It wasn't just advanced technology, it was technology that exhibited genuine intelligence, possibly even consciousness. The most disturbing aspect, Keldron continued, is that the armor appears to learn from each encounter. During the Mordian siege, I observed the same warrior facing similar threats on multiple occasions. Each time, his defensive responses became more efficient, more precise, more effective. The armor was developing tactical knowledge based on accumulated combat experience. I felt a chill as I processed the implications. Are you suggesting that the warrior's equipment is actually improving its performance over time? Exactly, Keldron confirmed. But not just improving, evolving. The weapon configurations I observed late in the battle were different from those he used at the beginning. New ammunition types, modified energy outputs, additional targeting systems that hadn't been present initially. His equipment was adapting and upgrading itself based on battlefield requirements. Brother Captain Alaric's expression had grown increasingly grim as the interrogation proceeded. Brother Keldron, in your professional opinion as someone who has studied technology from across the galaxy, where do you believe this equipment originates? The former Chaos Marine was quiet for a long moment, his mechanical components making subtle adjustments as he formulated his response. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone admitting something that challenged his fundamental understanding of reality. I believe the warrior's equipment comes from a version of humanity that followed a completely different technological development path, Keldron said slowly. Not just advanced technology, but technology based on different fundamental principles. A humanity that developed solutions to problems we didn't even know existed. He activated additional displays, showing comparative analyses between the warrior's equipment and various known technological paradigms. Imperial technology is based on comprehension of machine spirits, ritual maintenance, and gradual improvement of ancient patterns. Chaos technology focuses on corruption of existing systems and warp enhancement of conventional mechanisms. Alien technologies typically represent different approaches to the same basic scientific principles. But this warrior's equipment appears to be based on the fundamental assumption that matter and energy are far more malleable than we believe, that the barriers between different dimensional layers can be manipulated at will, that intelligence can be embedded into materials at the molecular level rather than requiring separate processing systems. The implications were staggering. If Keldron's analysis was correct, then the mysterious warrior didn't just possess superior technology. He possessed technology from a version of humanity that had solved problems the Imperium didn't even recognize as problems. A humanity that had achieved a level of scientific advancement that made current Imperial technology look like stone tools. "There's something else," Keldron added, his optical implants focusing on me with disturbing intensity. "The warrior's equipment shows signs of modification and upgrade that suggest he's been fighting similar battles for a very long time. Wear patterns that indicate centuries, or possibly millennia of continuous combat use. Battle damage that has been repaired using techniques that don't correspond to any known maintenance protocols." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know the answer. "I'm suggesting that this warrior has been fighting the forces of chaos for far longer than any normal human lifespan would allow," Keldron replied. "The accumulated modifications to his equipment, the tactical knowledge embedded in his armor's responses, the weapon configurations optimized for demon fighting, all of it suggests someone who has been perfecting his anti-chaos capabilities for centuries or millennia." The silence that followed was profound. If the warrior had indeed been fighting chaos forces for that long, it raised fundamental questions about his nature, his origins, and his ultimate objectives. Normal humans, even space marines, had limited lifespans and gradually accumulated psychological damage from exposure to chaos corruption. Yet this warrior appeared to be not just surviving, but improving with each encounter. "Brother Captain," I said finally, "do we have any intelligence on the warrior's physical capabilities separate from his equipment?" Alaric nodded, producing another classified file. "Analysis of battlefield recordings suggests that the warrior's physical performance exceeds even space marine capabilities. Reaction speeds that border on precognitive, strength that allows him to wield weapons that should require powered assistance, and endurance that enables continuous combat for extended periods without apparent fatigue." The physical analysis read like something from the legends of the Primarchs themselves. The warrior consistently demonstrated the ability to move faster than enhanced human reflexes should allow, survive impacts that would kill normal humans instantly, and maintain peak combat performance for periods that would exhaust even genetically enhanced space marines. "More intriguingly," Alaric continued, "the warrior shows signs of tactical awareness that suggests either extensive military training or natural combat instincts that exceed anything we've observed in normal humans. He consistently chooses optimal firing positions, exploits enemy weaknesses with minimal observation time, and adapts his tactics based on changing battlefield conditions." I studied the tactical analyses, noting patterns that suggested not just superior reflexes, but genuine strategic intelligence. The warrior didn't just react to threats, he anticipated them, positioned himself to exploit enemy weaknesses, and conducted his battles with the kind of tactical sophistication that typically required decades of military experience to develop. "The most disturbing aspect," Alaric added, "is that the warrior appears to enjoy combat in a way that suggests psychological adaptation to continuous warfare. Battlefield recordings show no signs of combat stress, hesitation, or psychological fatigue. He approaches each battle with what can only be described as enthusiasm. The psychological profile was deeply unsettling. Normal humans, even those trained for combat, accumulated psychological stress from exposure to violence and death. Space Marines were conditioned to manage such stress, but even they could suffer psychological damage from prolonged combat exposure. Yet this warrior appeared to thrive on combat, to become more focused and effective with each battle. "Brother Keldron," I said, turning back to the corrupted tech marine, "based on your analysis, what do you believe would happen if this warrior were to confront a Daemon Primarch in the warp itself?" Keldron's mechanical components whirred as he processed the question. Conventional analysis would suggest that the warrior would be overwhelmed instantly. Daemon Primarchs in their own domains possess power levels that approach those of the Chaos Gods themselves. The very environment would be hostile to any real space entity. He paused, his optical implants flickering with what might have been uncertainty. However, the warrior's equipment appears to be specifically designed for fighting entities that don't follow normal physical laws. If his technology can indeed manipulate dimensional boundaries, he might be able to impose real space physics on localized areas within the warp. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Imagine a bubble of normal reality moving through the warp," Keldron explained. "Within that bubble, conventional weapons would function normally, physical laws would remain consistent, and chaos corruption would be unable to take hold. It would be like carrying a piece of real space into the heart of the immaterium itself." The concept was both fascinating and terrifying. If the warrior could indeed create localized reality fields within the warp, it would explain his apparent immunity to chaos corruption and his ability to function effectively against demon entities. But it would also represent a level of technological sophistication that exceeded anything the Imperium had ever achieved. "The ultimate question," Brother Captain Alaric said grimly, "is whether such technology represents humanity's greatest achievement or its greatest heresy, and we may be about to find out which." Chapter 4: Into the Eye of Terror. The journey into the Eye of Terror began with calculations that defied every safety protocol the Imperial Navy had developed over 10 millennia of warp travel. Sitting in the strategium of the Grey Knight strike cruiser Righteous Fury, I watched Tech Marine Cassius input navigational data that should have been theoretically impossible. We were not merely entering the largest warp storm in the galaxy, we were attempting to navigate to specific coordinates within Angron's personal domain, a realm where reality itself bent to the will of pure rage. "Inquisitor!" Navigator Prime Valdris called from her position within the ship's navigation chamber, her voice distorted by the psychic dampening fields that protected her from the full fury of the Eye's chaotic energies. "The warp currents are unlike anything in our charts. The usual eddies and streams that allow for predictable travel have been replaced by something else. Rivers of pure fury that seem to be flowing toward a single convergence point deep within the Red Angel's territory." Brother Captain Alaric stood beside me, his Terminator armor crackling with the defensive fields that would be our only protection against the psychic emanations we were approaching. Around us, 47 Grey Knights made final preparations for what might be the last mission any of us would ever undertake. Each warrior had volunteered for this assignment, knowing that survival was unlikely, that witnessing the confrontation between the mysterious warrior and Angron might cost them their sanity, their souls, or worse. Or, "Captain," I said, reviewing the tactical projections one final time, "are we certain that our intelligence regarding the warrior's approach vector is accurate?" Alaric nodded grimly. Astropathic interceptions from across 3 sectors confirm the same pattern. Something is moving through the warp toward Angron's domain, following a trajectory that cuts through reality storms that should be impassable for any real space entity. The energy signature matches previous encounters with our mysterious warrior. The astropathic reports made for disturbing reading. Across multiple star systems, Imperial Psychers had detected something moving through the immaterium, with purpose and direction that defied normal warp travel. Where most entities that entered the warp became lost in its chaotic currents, subject to the whims of demons and the arbitrary changes in space and time that characterized the realm of souls, this presence moved with mechanical precision toward its destination. "What's most troubling," added Epistolary Hyperion, the Grey Knight's most senior psyker, "is that we can barely detect the warrior's presence at all. Normal warp travel creates disturbances that our psychic monitoring stations can track across entire sectors. But this entity generates almost no psychic signature, as if it's traveling through the warp without actually being affected by it. The implications were staggering. The warp was the realm of souls, emotion, and psychic energy. Everything that entered it became subject to its influence, from the smallest thoughts to the mightiest demon princes. Yet the warrior appeared to be moving through the immaterium as if it were merely another form of real space, immune to the corruption and chaos that defined the realm's very nature. Entering the outer edge of the Eye of Terror, Navigator Valdris announced, her voice now carrying the strain of maintaining course through increasingly violent warp currents. Reality distortion is approaching critical levels. Geller field integrity is holding, but I'm detecting presences that are taking notice of our intrusion. Through the viewing ports of the Strategium, I could see the impossible vista of the Eye of Terror spreading before us. Space itself was twisted into geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, while colors that had no names in any human language painted the void in hues that triggered primitive fears buried deep in human genetic memory. Worst of all were the shapes that moved through the chaos, entities of such alien malevolence that my mind struggled to process their existence without falling into madness. Demon ships, reported Brother Sergeant Thaddeus from the sensor station. Multiple contacts, but they're not moving to intercept. They appear to be observing us. The demon vessels were abominations that blended corrupted Imperial technology with warp-spawned flesh and metal, hulls that breathed with diseased lungs, weapon batteries that fired screaming souls instead of conventional munitions, and propulsion systems powered by the suffering of countless bound spirits. Yet, as Thaddeus had noted, they made no move to attack our relatively small Grey Knight's vessel. "They're letting us pass," Alaric observed, his psychically enhanced senses no doubt detecting nuances in the demon behavior that escaped normal perception. Which suggests that whatever is about to occur, the forces of chaos want witnesses. The idea was deeply unsettling. Chaos forces typically destroyed Imperial vessels on sight, especially Grey Knight ships that represented everything the demon princes despised about the Imperium's resistance to corruption. For them to deliberately allow us to witness the confrontation suggested that they were either supremely confident in Angron's victory, or they wanted the Imperium to understand exactly what they were dealing with. Approaching the inner sphere of Angron's domain, Navigator Valdris reported, her voice now strained to the breaking point. Reality flux is approaching levels that should be instantly fatal to unprotected humans. Whatever protection the Geller fields are providing, it won't last much longer. Through the viewing ports, we could now see the brass citadel that served as Angron's stronghold. It was a structure that defied architectural logic, with towers that twisted through dimensions and ramparts that existed in states of perpetual collapse and reconstruction. The very sight of it triggered violent impulses in the human brain, ancient evolutionary responses to the presence of ultimate predators. Several of the younger Grey Knights had begun involuntary combat preparations, their hands moving to weapon grips as their enhanced nervous systems responded to proximity to the Red Angel's presence. "Energy spike detected," Brother Sergeant Thaddeus announced suddenly. "Massive power buildup at coordinates. Emperor's Throne. That reading can't be correct." "What are you detecting?" Alaric demanded. "Sir, the energy levels suggest something equivalent to a battleship's main reactor achieving critical overload. But it's moving at speeds that should be impossible for anything that large. The signature is approaching Angron's citadel from the opposite side of our position." I felt my pulse quicken as the implications became clear. That's him. The warrior has arrived. The next few minutes passed in a state of suspended tension as our sensors tracked the approach of whatever entity was generating the impossible energy readings. Through the warp-twisted space around Angron's domain, we could detect massive movement as demon legions positioned themselves around the citadel. Thousands of Khorne berserkers, demon engines the size of Imperial titans, and worse things that had no names in any human language prepared for a confrontation that would reshape the balance of power in the Eye of Terror. "First visual contact," Thaddeus reported, his voice filled with disbelief. magnifying main viewer to maximum resolution. The image that appeared on our screens challenged every assumption I had developed about the mysterious warrior over months of investigation. Where I had expected to see some form of specialized transport vessel or unusual spacecraft, there was only a single figure in green armor, moving through the void of space, as if the absence of atmosphere and the crushing psychic pressure of the warp were merely minor inconveniences. "That's impossible," Epistolary Hyperion breathed. "No unprotected human can survive in the raw warp, especially not in the heart of the Eye of Terror. The psychic emanations alone should drive any normal person instantly insane." Yet there he was, the warrior whose exploits had been documented across dozens of Imperial worlds, moving through the chaotic energies of Angron's domain with the same mechanical precision he had demonstrated in real space. His armor showed no signs of corruption despite direct exposure to the pure essence of chaos, while his movements suggested some form of propulsion system that operated according to principles unknown to Imperial science. "He's heading directly for the Citadel," Brother Captain Alaric observed. "No attempt at stealth, no tactical preparation, no coordination with any support forces. He's simply going to walk up to Angron's front door and knock." The audacity of the approach was breathtaking. Angron's citadel was protected by defenses that could destroy entire Imperial fleets, guarded by demon legions that had been perfecting the art of warfare for 10,000 years, and situated in a realm where the Red Angel's power approached that of Khorne himself. Yet the warrior approached it as if it were merely another target to be eliminated. "Sir," Thaddeus reported, "I'm detecting massive activity within the Citadel. Power levels are spiking across the entire structure. Whatever Angron is doing, he's drawing on energy reserves that register as equivalent to stellar output." Through our enhanced viewing systems, we could see the brass citadel beginning to glow with internal fires as the Daemon Primarch prepared for battle. The very air around the structure began to shimmer with heat distortion, while the warp currents themselves seemed to bend toward the fortress, as if drawn by some irresistible force. "The Red Angel is manifesting," Epistolary Hyperion announced, his psychic senses detecting power levels that made him physically recoil. "The amount of warp energy being channeled through that citadel is approaching the threshold of what reality can contain without fundamental breakdown." I watched in fascination and horror as the citadel's central tower began to crack open like a massive egg, revealing something within that generated light bright enough to be visible across the void of space. The emergence of Angron in his full demon prince form was an event that sent shockwaves through the fabric of reality itself, distorting space-time in ways that made our sensor readings fluctuate wildly. "There," Alaric pointed to the main viewer. "The warrior has reached the citadel's outer defenses." What followed was unlike anything I had witnessed in 3 centuries of warfare against the forces of chaos. The warrior didn't slow down, didn't take cover, didn't show any recognition that he was facing defenses designed to stop entire armies. He simply continued his inexorable advance, his weapons speaking with voices that seemed to cut through the very chaos of the warp itself. Demon engines that had been forged in the deepest pits of Khorne's realm found their armor pierced by projectiles that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Bloodletter legions that had fought since before the founding of the Imperium were cut down by weapon fire that appeared to disrupt the fundamental forces holding their forms together. Lesser demon princes that possessed power enough to level cities were staggered by impacts that somehow affected their essence rather than merely their physical manifestations. "How is he doing that?" Thaddeus breathed, his tactical training struggling to comprehend what the sensors were showing. "Those weapons shouldn't be able to affect warp-based entities to that degree. His equipment operates on different principles than anything we understand," I replied, remembering Keldron's technical analysis. "He's not just fighting demons, he's imposing real space physics on warp-based entities." The warrior's advance through Angron's defenses was relentless, methodical, and terrifyingly efficient. Where Imperial forces would have required massive bombardments, careful tactical coordination, and enormous casualties to achieve similar results, he simply walked forward and eliminated everything in his path with what appeared to be casual precision. "The Citadel's main gates are opening," Alaric announced grimly. Angron himself is emerging. The sight of the Red Angel in his full Demon Prince form was something that human minds were simply not equipped to process. 12 meters of living brass and flame, wielding weapons that could cleave through reality itself, radiating an aura of pure rage that was visible to the naked eye as distortions in space around his massive form. His very presence caused the lesser demons in the vicinity to either flee in terror or explode from proximity to power levels they couldn't withstand. Yet the warrior never hesitated. As Angron emerged from his citadel, radiating fury that could drive entire populations to madness, the mysterious figure in green armor simply raised his weapons and opened fire. "Energy readings are off the scale," Thaddeus reported, his voice filled with awe. "Both combatants are generating power outputs that should be impossible for individual entities to sustain." The battle that followed was a clash between fundamentally different approaches to power and warfare. Angron fought as the avatar of Khorne's fury, wielding demon weapons that could cut through any material in the galaxy, generating psychic emanations that twisted reality to his will, and drawing on the accumulated rage of 10,000 years of warfare. His attacks were powerful enough to crack open planets, fast enough to outpace thought itself, and backed by the unlimited resources of a demon prince in his own domain. The warrior responded with precision, efficiency, and what could only be described as perfect tactical awareness. His weapons never missed, his positioning was always optimal, and his armor adapted to each new threat faster than conscious thought could direct such changes. Where Angron's attacks relied on overwhelming power, the warrior's responses demonstrated surgical precision that exploited weaknesses in the Daemon Primarchs' offense that shouldn't have been detectable. "This is impossible," Epistolary Hyperion muttered, his psychic senses struggling to process what was occurring. "Angron is drawing on power levels that approach those of Khorne himself. No single warrior should be able to stand against that kind of force." Yet stand he did. As the battle raged across the twisted landscape of Angron's domain, the warrior demonstrated capabilities that challenged every assumption about the nature of power in the galaxy. His weapons stripped away layers of Angron's Daemon Prince form with each shot. His movement allowed him to avoid attacks that should have been unavoidable, and his apparent immunity to chaos corruption meant that the Red Angel's psychic emanations had no effect on his combat effectiveness. "Look at the warp currents around the battle," Navigator Valdris called from her chamber, her voice filled with disbelief. The warrior is generating some form of reality field. The space immediately around him is operating according to normal physical laws despite being in the heart of the Eye of Terror. She was right. Through our enhanced sensors, we could detect a bubble of stable reality surrounding the warrior, moving with him as he fought. Within that bubble, conventional physics applied, chaos corruption was neutralized, and the warrior's equipment functioned at optimal efficiency. It was as if he was carrying a piece of normal space with him into the heart of the warp itself. The implications were staggering. If the warrior could indeed impose real space physics on warp-based environments, it meant he possessed technology that exceeded anything the Imperium had ever achieved. More than that, it suggested a level of understanding about the relationship between real space and the warp that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality itself. "The Daemon Primarch is faltering," Brother Captain Alaric observed, his enhanced senses detecting subtle changes in Angron's combat effectiveness. "His power levels are dropping, his attacks are becoming less coordinated. The warrior is winning." I watched in amazement as the impossible became reality. Angron, Daemon Primarch of Khorne, avatar of pure rage and fury, was being systematically dismantled by a single warrior whose existence challenged everything we thought we knew about power and corruption in the galaxy. Each exchange of fire left the Red Angel weaker, while the warrior appeared to be operating at peak efficiency. "Movement in the surrounding warp," Thaddeus reported urgently. "Multiple high-energy contacts approaching the battle zone. It looks like the other Daemon Primarchs are taking notice." Through the twisted space around us, we could detect the approach of entities whose power signatures matched those of Daemon Primarchs. Magnus the Red, Mortarion, possibly even Fulgrim himself, all converging on Angron's domain to witness something that none of them had believed possible. "They're not intervening," Alaric noted with grim satisfaction. They're watching. They want to see how this ends. As we watched, the battle reached its crescendo. Angron, reduced to perhaps half his original size, but still radiating enough power to level cities, made a final desperate assault on the warrior. The Red Angel's attack was everything that 10,000 years of Demon Prince evolution could achieve. Speed that transcended time, power that could crack reality itself, and fury that had been distilled into its purest possible form. The warrior met the attack with perfect precision, his weapons speaking with voices that seemed to cut through the very essence of chaos itself. The final exchange lasted perhaps 3 seconds of real space-time, but in those moments, the fundamental balance of power in the Eye of Terror shifted forever. When the energies cleared, Angron lay broken upon the brass plane of his own domain, his demon prince form reduced to little more than smoking fragments. The warrior stood over him, weapons already turning toward the approaching signatures of the other Daemon Primarchs, ready for whatever came next. "By the throne," Epistolary Hyperion whispered. He actually did it. He destroyed a Daemon Primarch in the heart of the warp itself. And in that moment, as reality itself seemed to hold its breath, we realized that everything we thought we knew about the galaxy was about to change forever. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. The silence that followed Angron's destruction was unlike anything I had experienced in 3 centuries of warfare. The constant background noise of the warp, the screaming of tortured souls, the laughter of demons, the endless whispers of corruption, simply stopped. For the first time since entering the Eye of Terror, the immaterium around us felt empty. Not peaceful, but void of the malevolent presence that had pressed against our consciousness since we arrived. "Warp disturbance readings are approaching 0, Navigator Valdris reported from her chamber, her voice filled with disbelief. It's as if the Demon Primarch's destruction has created a zone of absolute psychic silence. The local warp currents have simply ceased. Through the main viewer, we could see the warrior standing amid the smoking ruins of what had once been Angron's physical form. The green armor showed no signs of damage despite the apocalyptic battle that had just concluded, while his weapons remained ready for immediate use. More disturbing was his apparent indifference to what he had just accomplished. The destruction of a being that the Imperium had considered one of the greatest threats in the galaxy. "Sir," Brother Sergeant Thaddeus announced, his sensor readings showing patterns that defied conventional analysis. "I'm detecting massive movement throughout the Eye of Terror. Every major chaos force appears to be converging on our location." The tactical display showed a horrifying reality. Demon fleets from across the Eye of Terror were moving toward Angron's former domain with purpose and speed that suggested coordination at the highest levels. Magnus the Red's Thousand Sons, Mortarian's Death Guard, Fulgrim's Emperor's Children, and worse forces that served the Chaos Gods directly, all of them abandoning their eternal conflicts to focus on the single warrior who had just achieved the impossible. "They're terrified," Epistolary Hyperion observed, his psychic senses detecting emotional emanations from the approaching chaos forces. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Demon Primarchs are experiencing genuine fear. Brother Captain Alaric studied the tactical projections with the expression of someone reassessing fundamental assumptions about reality. The question is whether they intend to destroy the warrior or attempt to understand him. The destruction of Angron represents something unprecedented in their experience. I watched the warrior through our enhanced viewing systems, noting that his attention had already shifted to the approaching threats. His armor was performing what appeared to be detailed scans of the incoming chaos forces, while his weapons were cycling through different configurations as if preparing for multiple types of combat encounters. The efficiency of his preparation suggested either extensive experience with such situations or technology that could analyze and optimize for multiple threat scenarios simultaneously. "Movement on the Citadel ruins," Thaddeus reported. "Something is emerging from the debris." From the twisted wreckage of Angron's brass fortress, shapes were beginning to coalesce, not the Demon Prince himself, who had been thoroughly destroyed, but fragments of his essence that were attempting to reform. In the warp, true death was a complex concept. Demon princes could be banished, dispersed, or temporarily destroyed, but their connection to the Chaos gods often allowed for eventual resurrection or reformation. Yet, as we watched, the warrior turned his attention to these emerging fragments with what could only be described as casual interest. His weapons spoke once, twice, 3 times, precise shots that didn't just destroy the forming demon essence, but appeared to unravel it at the fundamental level. Where Angron's fragments had been attempting to coalesce, there was now nothing. Not banishment, not dispersal, but absolute termination. That shouldn't be possible, Hyperion breathed, his psychic senses struggling to process what he was witnessing. Demon princes are connected to their patron gods through bonds that transcend physical destruction. Even if their forms are destroyed, their essence should return to the warp for eventual reformation. Unless, I said slowly, remembering the technical analyses we had reviewed. The warrior's weapons are capable of severing those connections permanently. The implications were staggering. If the warrior could indeed inflict true death upon demon entities, it meant he possessed capabilities that went beyond mere superior firepower. He was somehow able to disrupt the fundamental forces that allowed chaos entities to exist, cutting them off from the warp energies that sustained their existence. First contact with advanced elements, Thaddeus announced, as the fastest of the approaching chaos forces entered sensor range. Multiple demon prince signatures, accompanied by what appears to be an entire fleet of corrupted vessels. The advance force was led by entities whose power signatures identified them as demon princes of significant standing, beings who had served the Chaos gods for millennia and commanded legions of corrupted space marines. Under normal circumstances, such a force would be capable of devastating entire Imperial sectors. Yet as they approached the warrior's position, their behavior suggested uncertainty rather than confidence. They're maintaining formation at maximum engagement range, Alaric observed. They're not immediately attacking, they're studying him. The demon princes had apparently learned from Angron's fate. Rather than rushing into direct confrontation, they were maintaining distance while their supporting forces established a perimeter around the debris field. The tactical caution was unusual for Chaos forces, which typically relied on overwhelming aggression and the corrupting influence of their presence to achieve victory. "Sir," Thaddeus reported, "I'm detecting communication transmissions between the Chaos forces. They appear to be negotiating." The idea of demon princes negotiating with anyone was almost as unprecedented as the warrior's victory over Angron. Chaos entities typically communicated through violence, corruption, and the imposition of their will upon weaker beings. Yet the approaching forces were maintaining communication protocols that suggested genuine uncertainty about how to proceed. "Can we intercept their transmissions?" I asked, hoping to gain insight into how the Chaos forces were interpreting what they had witnessed. Epistolary Hyperion concentrated his psychic abilities on the communication streams passing between the demon forces. "Their transmissions are confused, Inquisitor. Multiple command structures are attempting to establish authority over the situation, but none of them seem to have protocols for dealing with someone who can inflict permanent death upon demon princes." "What are they saying specifically?" Alaric demanded. "There's discussion of whether the warrior represents some form of weapon created by the Emperor himself," Hyperion reported. "Other theories suggest he might be an agent of the Eldar attempting to manipulate the balance between chaos and order. Some of the demon princes believe he might be connected to the Necrons and their reality manipulation technology. None of the theories suggested that the Chaos forces understood the warrior's true nature any better than we did. They were operating from the same fragmentary information and impossible observations that had confounded Imperial analysts for months. The difference was that they were now faced with the immediate tactical problem of how to deal with someone who had just demonstrated the ability to permanently destroy one of their greatest champions. "Movement from the warrior," Thaddeus announced. "He's advancing toward the Chaos forces. Through our viewing systems, we could see the warrior beginning to move across the debris field toward the assembled demon forces. His approach was methodical and direct, showing no signs of concern about the overwhelming numerical disadvantage he faced. If anything, his behavior suggested anticipation rather than caution. "Energy readings are spiking again," Thaddeus reported. "His weapons are cycling through configurations I haven't seen before. Whatever he's preparing for, it's different from his previous engagements." The warrior's equipment was indeed displaying new capabilities. Additional weapon systems were extending from his armor. Energy patterns were forming around his position that suggested defensive preparations, and his movement had taken on a quality that seemed to bend space around him. He was preparing for a battle on a scale that exceeded even his confrontation with Angron. "The demon princes are responding," Hyperion announced. "They're withdrawing to long-range positions and deploying their most powerful servants." The Chaos Forces had apparently decided that direct confrontation was inadvisable. Instead of facing the warrior themselves, they were deploying demon engines, corrupted titans, and other mechanical servants that could engage the warrior without risking their own permanent destruction. The tactical shift represented a level of strategic thinking that was unusual for Chaos Forces. "Interesting," Brother Captain Alaric observed. "They're treating him as a strategic asset rather than just another enemy. They want to understand his capabilities before committing their irreplaceable resources." The battle that followed was unlike anything we had previously witnessed. The warrior faced wave after wave of demon engines, each group more powerful than the last, while the demon princes maintained safe observation distances and analyzed his combat performance. It was less a battle than an extended field test, with the Chaos Forces gathering data on the warrior's capabilities and limitations. Yet, as the engagement progressed, it became clear that the warrior was conducting his own analysis. His weapons adapted to each new threat with increasing efficiency. His positioning improved with each wave of enemies, and his overall combat effectiveness seemed to be growing rather than declining despite the sustained assault. "He's learning faster than they are," I realized. Each wave of enemies is teaching him more about Chaos capabilities than his combat performance is revealing to them. "More than that," Thaddeus added, studying the sensor readings. "His energy output is actually increasing. Prolonged combat appears to be enhancing his capabilities rather than depleting them." The concept violated every principle of warfare I understood. Normal combatants became fatigued, depleted their ammunition, and suffered equipment degradation over time. Yet the warrior appeared to be operating according to different principles, as if sustained combat actually improved his performance rather than reducing it. "Movement from the main Chaos fleet," Hyperion announced. "Magnus the Red himself is approaching the battlefield." The arrival of the Crimson King marked a significant escalation in the situation. Magnus the Red was arguably the most intelligent of the Daemon Primarchs, possessing psychic abilities that exceeded those of most Chaos gods and strategic thinking that had confounded Imperial forces for 10,000 years. His presence suggested that the Chaos forces were treating the warrior as a threat that required their most sophisticated response. Through our enhanced viewing systems, we could see Magnus materializing on the edge of the battlefield, a figure of impossible beauty and terrible power, whose very presence caused reality to flux around him in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Unlike Angron's approach to warfare, Magnus represented intellect and psychic might rather than brute force and fury. "He's not attacking," Alaric observed. "He's studying the warrior." Magnus had indeed taken a position that allowed for detailed observation without immediate engagement. The Crimson King was apparently applying his vast intellect to the problem of understanding what the warrior represented and how his capabilities might be countered or exploited. "Psychic probe detected," Hyperion announced urgently. Magnus is attempting to scan the warrior's mind directly. The psychic assault that followed was something that should have been visible to the naked eye. Energies powerful enough to drive entire populations insane, focused on a single target with precision that represented 10,000 years of psychic warfare experience. Magnus was attempting to penetrate the warrior's mental defenses and discover the source of his remarkable capabilities. Yet as we watched, the warrior simply continued his systematic destruction of demon engines, showing no sign that he was even aware of the psychic assault. Magnus's probe, which should have been capable of reading the thoughts of anyone in the galaxy, appeared to encounter nothing. Not resistance, not shields, but absolute absence. "The psychic scan is finding no target," Hyperion reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Magnus is encountering the same phenomenon we've observed before. The warrior simply doesn't exist psychically." The failure of Magnus's psychic probe had a profound effect on the assembled Chaos forces. We could detect communication spikes between the various demon princes as they struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Magnus the Red, master of psychic warfare and student of forbidden knowledge, had failed to achieve even basic mental contact with their mysterious enemy. "They're withdrawing," Thaddeus announced suddenly. "All Chaos forces are pulling back to maximum sensor range. They're retreating." The withdrawal was organized and purposeful, rather than panicked, but it represented something unprecedented in Chaos behavior. Demon princes and their forces were voluntarily ceding territory to a single opponent, abandoning positions they had held for millennia rather than risking direct confrontation. "They're regrouping for a different kind of response," I realized. "They've concluded that conventional warfare won't work against him." As the Chaos forces established a new perimeter at extreme range, the warrior completed his destruction of the remaining demon engines and turned his attention toward our own position. For the first time since we had begun observing him, his weapons were oriented in our direction. "He knows we're here," Alaric said grimly. "The question is whether he considers us enemies or merely witnesses." The moment of truth had arrived. After months of investigation and hours of observation, we were about to have direct contact with the mysterious warrior who had just redefined the balance of power in the galaxy. Whether that contact would be peaceful or hostile remained to be determined. Chapter 6. First Contact. The warrior's attention focused on our position with an intensity that made the ship's hull creak under psychic pressure that shouldn't have existed. He had just finished systematically destroying demon engines that could level cities, face down demon princes that could corrupt entire worlds, and somehow forced Magnus the Red himself into tactical withdrawal. Now those same weapons that had permanently ended Angron's existence were oriented toward the Grey Knight's strike cruiser that had served as our observation platform. "All systems showing stress indicators," Tech Marine Cassius reported from his position at the engineering station. "The warrior's attention is generating some form of scanning field that's interfering with our machine spirits. It's not hostile, but it's comprehensive." Brother Captain Alaric stood motionless beside me, his enhanced senses no doubt detecting nuances in the situation that escaped normal perception. The Grey Knights were genetically and psychically conditioned to face the worst horrors that crawled out of the warp, but this warrior represented something outside their categories of known threats. He wasn't corrupt, wasn't obviously hostile, but his power levels and capabilities clearly exceeded anything in Imperial doctrine. "Sir," Navigator Valdris called from her chamber, "the warrior is approaching us. His method of locomotion doesn't correspond to any propulsion system in our databases. He appears to be moving through space by direct manipulation of gravitational fields." Through the main viewer, we could see the figure in green armor covering the distance between the battlefield and our position with mechanical precision. His movement through the void of space showed no signs of conventional thrusters or gravitic drives, yet he was accelerating at rates that should have been impossible for anything the size of a human in powered armor. Attempting to establish communication, Astropath Prime Kellyan announced from the ship's communication chamber. "Standard Imperial Vox frequencies, emergency channels, even basic mathematical progressions. No response on any channel." "He may not use the same communication protocols we do," I observed, remembering the technical analyses that suggested the warrior's equipment operated according to different fundamental principles. "Try broader spectrum scanning. Look for any form of structured energy emission that might represent attempted communication." The minutes that followed were among the most tense of my long career. We were alone in the heart of the Eye of Terror, surrounded by Chaos forces that had temporarily withdrawn, but remained within striking distance. facing an entity whose capabilities seemed to exceed those of Daemon Primarchs themselves. The wrong decision in the next few minutes could result in the destruction of our vessel and the loss of all the intelligence we had gathered. "Contact," Kellyan announced suddenly. He's broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't be able to penetrate warp interference. The signal is reaching us through communication channels that don't exist in Imperial technology. "What's the message?" Alaric demanded. "It's not words, Brother Captain. It's data streams, technical specifications, tactical assessments, and what appears to be a complete analysis of our vessel's capabilities and crew composition." He's sharing information rather than demanding it. The concept was staggering. Rather than the interrogation or threats we might have expected from such a powerful entity, the warrior was voluntarily providing us with information. The data streams that Kellyan was receiving contained intelligence that would have taken Imperial tech adepts months to compile, delivered in formats that our equipment could somehow process despite operating on different technological principles. He knows who we are, I realized, studying the preliminary analysis of the data streams. Ship classification, crew manifest, mission parameters, everything. He's been aware of our presence since we entered the Eye of Terror. More than that, Tech Marine Cassius added, his mechanical enhancement allowing him to process the technical data faster than normal human cognition. He's providing us with improved shielding configurations for operating in warp-disrupted environments, optimization protocols for our weapon systems, and tactical recommendations for dealing with the chaos forces that are still monitoring our position. The warrior was not just sharing information, he was actively helping us improve our capabilities. The technological upgrades he was transmitting would make our vessel more effective in exactly the kinds of situations we regularly faced as Grey Knights. It was as if he understood our mission parameters and was providing assistance based on detailed knowledge of Imperial tactics and objectives. "Transmission complete," Kellyan announced. "He's waiting. I believe he's given us everything he intended to share and is now awaiting our response." Brother Captain Alaric and I exchanged glances that conveyed 3 centuries of shared experience, dealing with unprecedented situations. Every instinct developed through decades of fighting chaos suggested that entities with this level of power were inherently dangerous to humanity. Yet the warrior's behavior suggested cooperation rather than hostility, assistance rather than conquest. "Open all communication channels," I ordered. "I'll attempt direct contact." The Vox systems crackled to life, amplified by the ship's most powerful transmitters and focused toward the warrior's position. I took a deep breath, aware that the next words I spoke might determine whether humanity had gained its greatest ally or faced its most dangerous enemy. "Unknown warrior," I began, using the formal protocols developed for first contact with potentially hostile alien entities. "I am Inquisitor Valerian Thorne of the Ordo Malleus, representing the Imperium of Man. We have observed your actions against the forces of chaos and wish to establish communication." The response came immediately, not through our Vox systems, but directly into our minds. Not psychic communication in the sense that Imperial psychers understood it, but something that bypassed psychic defenses entirely and conveyed information with perfect clarity and precision. "I am the Slayer. I fight the forces of hell wherever they manifest. Your Imperium faces the same enemies I have battled across realities. I offer cooperation against our common foe." The mental voice carried no emotional coloration, no suggestion of deception or hidden agenda. It was a simple statement of fact delivered with mechanical precision. Yet the implications were staggering. Confirmation that the warrior came from another reality, acknowledgement that he understood our struggle against chaos, and an offer of alliance that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "You come from another reality?" I asked, struggling to process the casual way he had confirmed our most speculative theories. "Correct. A reality where humanity faced similar corruption from entities equivalent to your chaos gods. I have been fighting such forces for a very long time. Your reality's manifestation of hell is familiar to me." Brother Captain Alaric leaned forward, his tactical mind already processing the strategic implications. What happened to the hell in your reality? It was destroyed. All demons were eliminated. All corruption was purged. The forces of hell no longer exist in my universe. The silence that followed was profound. The warrior was claiming to come from a reality where humanity had not just survived its encounter with chaos-equivalent forces, but had actually won. Completely, permanently, and utterly. The very concept challenged fundamental assumptions about the eternal nature of the struggle between order and chaos. How? I asked, though I suspected the answer would be difficult to comprehend. Superior technology, better tactics, absolute refusal to compromise with evil, and most importantly, understanding that hell's greatest weapon is the belief that it cannot be defeated. The response carried implications that went far beyond military strategy. The warrior was suggesting that the Imperium's approach to fighting chaos, containing it, managing it, accepting eternal struggle as humanity's fate, was fundamentally flawed. That victory was possible if humanity was willing to pursue it with sufficient determination and technological advancement. "The forces observing us," Alaric interjected. "The Daemon Primarchs who withdrew from your position. What are their intentions? They are attempting to understand something outside their experience. In their reality, corruption is permanent, damnation is eternal, and hope is a weakness to be exploited. They cannot comprehend the existence of something that is immune to their influence." "And you are immune?" I asked. "Completely. Hell's power comes from corruption of the soul, exploitation of weakness, and the gradual erosion of virtue through compromise. I cannot be corrupted because I have already chosen my path. I cannot be tempted because I desire nothing that hell can offer. I cannot be turned because my purpose is absolute." The psychological profile that emerged from the warrior's words was both inspiring and disturbing. He was describing a level of psychological conditioning that exceeded anything achieved by imperial military training, religious indoctrination, or even the genetic modifications applied to space marines. He had somehow achieved a state of perfect psychological immunity to chaos corruption. "What is your purpose in our reality?" I asked, dreading the answer, but needing to understand his ultimate objectives. "The same purpose I have always had. To kill every demon, destroy every manifestation of hell, and ensure that no innocent suffers from corruption. Your reality's version of hell is particularly powerful, but the fundamental principles remain the same." "You intend to destroy chaos itself?" Alaric asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "The chaos gods, their demon princes, all of their manifestations across the galaxy." "Correct." The casual certainty with which he confirmed our most ambitious hopes was staggering. The warrior was not just offering to help the Imperium fight chaos, he was declaring his intention to completely eliminate it. To succeed where 10,000 years of Imperial warfare had failed. To achieve the ultimate victory that humanity had dreamed of but never dared to believe possible. "The other Daemon Primarchs," I said, thinking through the tactical implications. "They're still monitoring this situation. What happens when they decide you represent an existential threat? They will attempt to destroy me using every resource at their disposal. They will coordinate their efforts, combine their power, and utilize strategies developed over millennia of warfare. They will fail." "How can you be certain?" "Because I have faced equivalent challenges before. Because my capabilities exceed their understanding. And because they operate according to the fundamental assumption that corruption is stronger than purity. That assumption is false." The warrior's confidence was absolute, backed by demonstrated capabilities that had already exceeded our most optimistic projections. Yet he was proposing to face challenges that would make his victory over Angron look like a training exercise. The combined might of all the Daemon Primarchs, supported by their legions and empowered by the Chaos Gods themselves, represented power levels that approached those of the Emperor during his prime. "What do you require from the Imperium?" I asked, hoping to understand how we might contribute to such an ambitious campaign. "Information on target locations, tactical intelligence on enemy capabilities, and coordination to minimize civilian casualties during major operations. I do not require material support, but cooperation will make the process more efficient. The warrior was offering to wage a campaign that would free humanity from its greatest enemy, and he was asking for nothing more than information and coordination. No territorial concessions, no political authority, no resources beyond basic intelligence sharing. It was an offer that seemed too good to be true, which made it inherently suspicious to someone with my training and experience. "Inquisitor!" Epistolary Hyperion's voice came through the internal vox. "I'm detecting massive movement from the Chaos forces. Multiple Daemon Primarchs are converging on our position. I believe our conversation has convinced them that immediate action is necessary." Through the main viewer, we could see the approaching energy signatures of beings whose power exceeded anything we had previously encountered. Magnus the Red, Mortarion, Fulgrim, and entities whose classifications remained unclear were moving toward our position with purpose and coordination that suggested careful planning. "They have concluded that I represent an unacceptable threat," the warrior observed, his mental voice carrying no concern about the overwhelming force bearing down on us. "This will be an excellent opportunity to demonstrate the validity of my tactical approach." "You intend to face all of them simultaneously?" I asked, struggling to believe that even his demonstrated capabilities could overcome such odds. "Yes. Their coordination will actually work to my advantage. Rather than fighting separate campaigns against individual Daemon Primarchs, I can eliminate them all in a single engagement. The approaching confrontation would determine the fate of the galaxy itself. If the warrior succeeded, humanity would be free to pursue its destiny without the eternal shadow of chaos corruption. If he failed, the Daemon Primarchs would gain knowledge of his capabilities that might allow them to develop countermeasures for future encounters. "We should withdraw to a safe distance," Alaric suggested, though his tone indicated he knew there was no safe distance from what was about to occur. "No," the warrior replied. "You will remain to witness and record. Humanity needs to understand what is possible when evil is confronted with absolute determination. Your testimony will be required to convince your Imperium that total victory is achievable." As the Daemon Primarchs approached, their combined power was already beginning to affect local reality in ways that threatened the structural integrity of space itself. Yet the warrior remained motionless, his weapons ready but not yet active, waiting for the moment when all of his enemies would be in optimal position for elimination. The final battle for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin. Chapter 7: The Final Gambit. The convergence of Daemon Primarchs created distortions in reality that made our previous observations of warp phenomena seem like minor fluctuations. Magnus the Red approached from the spinward direction, his psychic presence so powerful that it was visible as aurora-like effects crackling across the void. Mortarion materialized from clouds of poisonous gas that shouldn't have been able to exist in vacuum, his Death Guard legions spreading corruption through space itself. Fulgrim descended from above, with an escort of demon engines whose forms were too perfect to observe without risking madness. "Structural integrity warnings across all decks," Tech Marine Cassius reported, his voice strained as he struggled to maintain the ship's systems against psychic interference that was affecting even blessed machine spirits. "The combined presence of multiple Daemon Primarchs is causing reality distortion effects that exceed our Geller field compensation capabilities." I felt the familiar sensation of chaos proximity beginning to affect my mind. Whispers at the edge of consciousness, suggestions that cooperation with the Daemon Primarchs might be preferable to destruction, subtle erosions of faith that had claimed stronger men than myself. Yet somehow, the warrior's presence seemed to generate a counter-effect that neutralized the worst of the psychic assault. "He's creating a reality stabilization field," Navigator Valdris announced from her chamber, her voice filled with wonder and relief. "The space around him is maintaining normal physical laws despite the Daemon Primarch presence. We're protected as long as we remain within range of his effect." Through the main viewer, we could see the warrior standing motionless in the void as the most powerful servants of chaos surrounded him. His armor showed no signs of stress, despite exposure to psychic energies that should have been instantly fatal to any unprotected human. More remarkably, his weapons remained in a ready position, but not actively targeting any specific threat, as if he was waiting for all of his enemies to position themselves optimally. Communication intercepts from the Daemon Primarchs, Epistolary Hyperion reported. They're negotiating terms of engagement, attempting to establish protocols for coordinated assault. The idea of Daemon Primarchs requiring coordination protocols was unprecedented. These were beings who had commanded legions for 10,000 years, who had fought the most sophisticated military campaigns in galactic history, who possessed tactical knowledge that exceeded anything available to current Imperial forces. Yet they were approaching the warrior with the kind of careful preparation typically reserved for siege warfare against fortified positions. "What are the terms they're discussing?" Brother Captain Alaric asked. "Simultaneous engagement from multiple vectors," Hyperion replied after concentrating on the psychic communications. "Magnus will provide psychic assault and reality manipulation. Mortarion will deploy biological warfare and entropic decay effects. Fulgrim will handle direct physical combat, with support from sonic weaponry. They're treating this as a siege operation, rather than a conventional battle." The tactical sophistication was impressive and deeply concerning. The Daemon Primarchs had apparently learned from Angron's defeat and were applying every lesson of warfare accumulated over millennia of experience. They understood that the warrior represented a threat that required their absolute best effort, coordinated perfectly and executed without the rivalry that typically characterized chaos operations. "Movement from the outer perimeter," Brother Sergeant Thaddeus announced. "Additional chaos forces are taking positions at maximum engagement range. It appears they're preparing for something." The additional forces were not positioned for direct combat involvement. Instead, they had formed a perimeter at distances that would allow observation but not immediate participation in the battle. The formation suggested that the Daemon Primarchs wanted witnesses to their victory, or perhaps insurance against the possibility that their coordinated assault might fail. "They're preparing contingency plans," I realized. "If their direct assault fails, they want reserve forces in position to respond immediately." "More than that," the warrior's mental voice interjected, his communication reaching us despite the increasing psychic interference from the approaching Daemon Primarchs. "They are preparing to retreat if necessary. For the first time in their existence, they are acknowledging the possibility of absolute defeat." The psychological implications were staggering. Daemon Primarchs were beings of absolute confidence, entities whose power had grown consistently for 10,000 years without experiencing genuine defeat. The idea that they were preparing escape routes suggested a level of uncertainty that was unprecedented in their existence. "Initiation of coordinated assault in 30 seconds, Hyperion announced, his psychic senses detecting the buildup of energies that would herald the beginning of the battle. All Daemon Primarchs are achieving maximum power states simultaneously. Through our enhanced viewing systems, we could see each Daemon Primarch beginning to manifest their full capabilities. Magnus was wreathed in psychic fire that made local space twist into impossible geometries. Mortarion's form was expanding into clouds of toxic energy that corrupted matter at the molecular level. Fulgrim was generating sonic frequencies that created visible distortions in the fabric of reality itself. "Combined power output is approaching stellar levels," Thaddeus reported, his voice filled with awe. "The energy they're generating collectively exceeds anything in our threat assessment databases." Yet the warrior remained motionless, his weapons still in ready position, but not yet engaged. His armor was conducting what appeared to be final systems checks, while energy patterns around his position suggested preparation for combat, on a scale that would make his previous engagements look like skirmishes. "Why isn't he moving?" I asked, struggling to understand the warrior's apparent passivity in the face of such overwhelming opposition. "Because he's waiting for optimal targeting solution," the warrior replied, his mental voice carrying absolute certainty. Daemon Primarchs are most vulnerable during the moment when they commit to coordinated attack. Their individual defenses become dependent on mutual support, creating opportunities for sequential elimination. The tactical analysis was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than facing 3 separate opponents at full defensive capability, the warrior was allowing them to position themselves in a formation that prioritized offensive coordination over individual survival. By waiting for their attack to begin, he was ensuring that they would be committed to a tactical approach that favored his capabilities. "Assault commencing," Hyperion announced. "All Daemon Primarchs are beginning their attack simultaneously." What followed was an assault on reality itself. Magnus unleashed psychic energies that rewrote local spacetime according to his will, creating zones where conventional physics ceased to function and thought became manifest. Mortarion deployed biological weapons that infected space itself with entropic decay, causing matter to age millennia in seconds and energy to dissipate into chaos. Fulgrim generated sonic attacks that operated across multiple dimensions simultaneously, targeting not just physical form, but the essential patterns that defined existence. The combined assault should have been capable of destroying entire star systems. The energies involved exceeded anything in Imperial weapons catalogues, while the sophistication of the attack represented the accumulated tactical knowledge of beings who had been perfecting warfare since before the Imperium's founding. Yet the warrior met their assault with perfect precision. His weapons spoke with voices that seemed to cut through the very essence of chaos itself, each shot precisely targeted to exploit weaknesses in the Daemon Primarchs' coordinated formation. Where Magnus created zones of altered reality, the warrior's projectiles imposed normal physics through dimensional manipulation. Where Mortarion's decay weapons attempted to age his equipment into uselessness, his armor regenerated faster than damage could accumulate. Where Fulgrim's sonic attacks targeted his essential existence, his reality field provided absolute protection. "He's not just defending," I observed, watching the tactical display with fascination. "He's systematically dismantling their coordination." The warrior's counterattack was a masterpiece of tactical precision. Rather than attempting to overpower the Daemon Primarchs through superior firepower, he was disrupting the mutual support that made their coordinated assault possible. Each shot was precisely placed to force individual Primarchs to strengthen their personal defenses at the expense of supporting their allies. "Magnus is faltering," Hyperion reported, his psychic sensors detecting changes in the Crimson King's power output. "The warrior's weapons are somehow disrupting his connection to the warp. His psychic abilities are diminishing with each exchange." The effect was spreading to the other Daemon Primarchs as well. Mortarion's biological weapons were becoming less effective as the warrior's reality field imposed constraints on how rapidly matter could be corrupted. Fulgrim's sonic attacks were losing coherence as dimensional manipulation disrupted their ability to target multiple reality layers simultaneously. "Impossible," Thaddeus breathed, studying sensor readings that defied conventional analysis. "The warrior's power output is actually increasing during the battle. Sustained combat against multiple Daemon Primarchs is enhancing rather than depleting his capabilities." The reversal was unprecedented. Daemon Primarchs were beings whose power grew through conflict and corruption, who became stronger as battles progressed and their enemies weakened. Yet the warrior appeared to operate according to similar but superior principles, drawing strength from the opposition he faced and becoming more effective with each exchange. "First Daemon Primarch elimination," Hyperion announced suddenly. "Magnus the Red is gone." Through the main viewer, we could see the space where the Crimson King had been conducting his assault. There was no explosion, no dramatic dissolution, simply absence where one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy had existed moments before. Magnus had been eliminated so completely that even his psychic presence had been erased from local space. "How is that possible?" I asked, struggling to process what we had witnessed. "The warrior's weapons operate on principles that allow permanent termination of warp-based entities," Brother Captain Alaric observed grimly. "Not banishment, not temporary destruction, but absolute ending." The loss of Magnus had immediate effects on the remaining Daemon Primarchs. Their coordinated assault began to collapse as Mortarion and Fulgrim were forced to compensate for the absence of psychic support they had been depending on. The tactical formation that had been their greatest strength became a vulnerability as they struggled to maintain effectiveness without their most versatile ally. Mortarion is withdrawing, Thaddeus reported. His biological weapons are proving ineffective, and he's attempting to retreat to long-range positions. Yet the warrior's response to the attempted withdrawal was swift and decisive. His weapons reconfigured for long-range engagement, generating projectiles that covered interplanetary distances in seconds and struck with precision that ignored conventional defensive measures. Mortarion's retreat became a desperate flight as weapons fire pursued him across the battlefield with relentless efficiency. Second elimination confirmed, Hyperion announced. Mortarion has been permanently destroyed. The battle was rapidly becoming a rout. Fulgrim, left without support from his fellow Daemon Primarchs, was facing the warrior's full attention while struggling to maintain offensive capabilities against an opponent who seemed immune to his most sophisticated attacks. The Demon Prince of Slaanesh had built his power on the exploitation of weakness and desire, but the warrior presented no psychological vulnerabilities that could be targeted. Fulgrim is attempting to negotiate, Hyperion reported, his psychic senses detecting communication attempts from the last surviving Daemon Primarch. He's offering information, alliance terms, anything to avoid destruction. The warrior's response? I asked. None. He's treating negotiation attempts as irrelevant noise. His weapons remain focused on complete elimination. The final exchange lasted perhaps 10 seconds of real space-time. Fulgrim deployed every capability at his disposal. Sonic weapons that could shatter reality, psychic assaults that could corrupt the purest souls, and physical attacks that exceeded the power of orbital bombardments. Yet the warrior met each assault with perfect tactical precision, his weapons speaking with voices that cut through the essence of chaos itself. When the energies cleared, the space around us was empty, except for the warrior and our own vessel. 3 Daemon Primarchs, beings whose power had terrorized the galaxy for 10,000 years, had been eliminated completely. Not banished to the warp for eventual return, not temporarily destroyed to reform elsewhere, but permanently ended. Threat assessment complete, the warrior's mental voice announced, his communication reaching us with the same mechanical precision he had demonstrated throughout the engagement. Primary chaos leadership in this sector has been eliminated. Secondary targets remain for future operations. The casual tone with which he discussed the elimination of 3 Daemon Primarchs was perhaps more unsettling than the battle itself. For him, the destruction of beings that the Imperium considered among the greatest threats in the galaxy was simply the completion of routine objectives. The Chaos forces on the perimeter, I asked, what are their current status? Retreating to long-range positions, they are reassessing threat evaluation and requesting instructions from higher authority. Some are attempting to flee the sector entirely. Through our sensor readings, we could indeed detect massive movement as Chaos fleets that had been converging on the battlefield began withdrawal operations. The elimination of 3 Daemon Primarchs had apparently convinced the remaining forces that direct confrontation was inadvisable. What happens next? Brother Captain Alaric asked. I continue operations against Chaos manifestations throughout the galaxy. Your Imperium provides intelligence on target locations and coordinates civilian evacuation from combat zones. Together, we eliminate the forces of hell from this reality. The warrior's plan was breathtaking in its scope and ambition. He intended to conduct a galaxy-wide campaign against every manifestation of chaos, from the smallest cultist cell to the chaos gods themselves. It was a war that would reshape the fundamental nature of reality and determine whether humanity would finally be free from its greatest enemy. As we prepared to return to Imperial space with news that would transform everything humanity thought it knew about its destiny, the warrior turned his attention toward the deepest reaches of the Eye of Terror, where greater challenges awaited. The real war was just beginning.